Welcome to episode 189 of the Daniel Yoris podcast with today's guest, Kyle Smith. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Joined here once again, been a while, but joined once again by Kyle Smith, clarity consultant, Kyle Smith. Kyle, thanks for being here, buddy.
Thanks for having me, dude. Pumped to be here again in a different walk of life. Yeah,
this is true. Define for me and for the people listening, what is a clarity consultant? And maybe it's easier, you take it whichever way you want. What is it that you are doing now?
Well, the title of clarity consultant is one that I created myself because my practice now it exists. So it didn't have an actual occupational title. So when I was filling things out for anything that requires a business name, it's like, what's your title? And I'm like, I don't really know. Clarity consultant. And I like the alliterations too. I really like that one. So what I do as a clarity consultant, in short, is helping folks, gain more clarity on their thoughts, to get them thinking about their thinking, to declutter the mind in order to experience a fulfilling life, however the subjective individual defines that for themselves. It's very subjective. So I don't want people to adopt anything that doesn't resonate with them. If something resonates, they can take it, they can teach it. And I encourage everyone to teach whatever I teach, or to teach whatever I have taught, in order to allow that information to continue forward, because it ripples. And it goes through three main points where I help folks in the first chunk get unstuck. So it's diving into stories that hurt, haunt, taunt, annoy, trauma, and stories, to define stories. Because I had a conversation yesterday and my buddy was like, I don't even know what you mean by stories. When I say stories, I mean experiences, traumas, narratives that have been adopted by your parents because they were around us the most often when we were a kid. So we absorbed their stories. And then some of those stories are helpful and some of those stories are harmful. And what I do with the getting unstuck is allowing people to, I create the set and setting that allows facilitation for folks to explore their stories in a courageous, safe manner where there's no right or wrong. There's simply exploration and alleviation. So exploration of the stories, which stories suck the most, which ones stuck the least, which ones are people open to exploring. I will never go into an experience or a story unless someone's open to doing it. You cannot pay me $1 million to go into a story that someone doesn't want to go into. When someone wants to go into it, freaking all down for that. And for this first chunk, the reason for the decluttering is to create space in the mind in order to be able to open up the ideas, where if we keep the stories in our head, it's infinite. It's always going to be there. So then what we are able to do, either pen to paper or on a desktop, is write those stories out, get them from the head to paper where they have a start and a finish. And it's really funny. Most folks that I do this work with, they'll say, oh man, I got a lot of stories. Oh, this is going to be like something like that, where it's like an overwhelming amount of stories. However, when we actually take the stories out, we see that there's not that many stories that are really having a hindrance on our progress and on our person. So once those negative, intense stories are decreased, and myself and my participant or my client will also know, or whoever I'm with, because I'll do it in groups as well, they'll notice when there's no more intensity and they have an openness, and they actually recognize the ahas. And I'd like to joke about it and say, wow, everything's so open, so clear. I can feel better. I feel inspired. I feel motivated. And then my response is, welcome to abundance. And so from there, then we go into celebrating the wins. And I'm not sure if you know this, but folks are not good at taking compliments or receiving compliments. And it's even worse when it's to ourselves. So we can celebrate other people's wins. We can celebrate our own wins. We can celebrate the progress we're making. So let's say we haven't completed the win per se. We are still celebrating the progress to making it to that win. That way we're able to look at the gain of progress, not just the gap between where we are and where we want to be. So when we celebrate those wins and tying into that last part, we go into setting up targets and target, story, plan. And then we just break it down and we just come up with experiences, goals, targets, in what I like to call the 4 F's of fate, whether it's a target that's in fitness, so physical and mental fitness. It could be financial, whether it's paying off debt, saving money, saving for doing something business-wise, or anything along those lines having to do with finances, moving to a new house, getting a new apartment, grabbing yourself a camper van. And then from there, it's writing those stories out and then creating those targets in order to be able to come up with a plan to get them and accomplish them. Oh, right. And so fitness, finance, and then there's fellowship. So the people we make space for. What are your targets for the people you want to spend time with? What are your targets with the people you don't want to spend time with? What are your targets with developing the fellowship and the relationship within one's self? And then from there, the final F is fulfillment. What are those big, audacious, hairy goals that we want to accomplish that seem impossible, quotey fingers, impossible, however, are much more doable than you think. So that's the practice. And what I do as a clarity consultant. There we go.
Thank you for that. That was very good. Before we kind of dig into that, I want to ask about how you, I don't want to say came up with it. That feels like the wrong phrase to use, but like last time we spoke and last time I saw you in Edmonton, you were still fitness coaching and very much along your thought process was definitely here for sure, but It wasn't defined as such. And you didn't come up with the title of clarity consultant. Like you hadn't thought of those things yet. Not that I know of anyways.
Accurate.
So how did you craft this, and how did you also become clear in your own self to say like, hey, I'm going to not leave the fitness behind, but morph this into something a little bit more and a little bit further from that?
Whoo! That's a good one. Sorry for everyone's ears. I just got excited by that answer or question. Sorry. So I'll say that's an amalgamation for sure over the last 34 years of my life. So there's that one, there's that component, and my own personal changes. So in 2016 was when I made my most prominent changes to shift my mindset and my identity from someone who I did not really respect, that I did not really think higher of myself. I thought lesser of myself. And rather than sitting in the suck and stuck, I decided to make a pivot. So 34 years to get here, 2016, most prominent time where that was when I was shifting who I am, my own character. And I believe that it is not the past. It is not the past or the future that influences the present. It is the past and the future that provides a frame for us to make decisions in the present. And so I started making more decisions from a future setting rather than a past setting. So I personally, unless it's for educational purposes or to be able to have clarity or to frame things, I have a very low importance of the past. So I don't think the past is as important as many folks make it out to be, which could be an interesting thing to say. Now I'm saying it out loud. However, with that, there is also a client I had in particular, and it was a fitness client. And looking back on it now, so in the past things. So anything that's in the past, we can't really change it. That's why I think that there's a low importance level to it. It's good to go into it and to alleviate any intense feelings about it and to look into it, not to reminisce, but to reflect on how we can improve things for our decisions going into the future. That's what I believe the past is good for. It's to provide information in order for us to make better decisions in the present. And also, this is just a nerdy thing. If there's any, like, I think I said this on your last one too. So in God of War Ragnarok, I didn't play the game. I watched the gameplay because I'm watch the gameplay while I'm working because what the fuck? So there's this one scene where Kratos, Freya, and he's Loki at this point, but Atreus, they go to the Sisters of Fate, the Norse Sisters of Fate, and so similar to how the Greek Sisters of Fate, they would thread someone's timeline, they would thread their life, and what the Norse once said that was really cool is that they don't create the future through a thread. They actually look at the character. I'm just going to put it how I'll say it. They look at the character's, paraphrase it. They look at the character's past in order to come up with a prediction based off of analytics and data as to how the person's going to behave in the future. So in the present, we can adjust that. So that's my past thing. So then I had this client where I think of it where him and I were good coach and client, wrong time. So when we were talking, like when we were having a conversation either on Zoom or if it was like on a phone call, it was always solid. We were diving in and my intention with anyone I work with is to collect aha moments or epiphanies. Because when we collect those aha moments, that means we're changing up directions in our synapses, or we're connecting two different thoughts that we thought were separate. So when we collect those aha moments, then the picture gets bigger and we can see more. We have more objectivity. We can see it as is rather than seeing it how we believe it to be. And so we had a little difficulty. So we wandered on outwards, and I actually found myself really big time questioning the practice. And so the following client that I had, almost like side by side, same physiology. One guy was older. The newest guy, the person after was older, and then the other one was younger. That was the only variable that changed. Family, same. Emergency services worker, same. Both of them were bald, same. And so I was thinking to myself, I had doubt, where is this practice actually something that works? And so went with him, and he ended up losing 50 pounds in 3 months. So then that opened up the opportunity for me to reflect on, okay, so if the practice works, then how was I not communicating properly? So that's where that part came in. So then I went into this whole world of communication, and then started learning more about words and the power of words and stories, and how words can either help us or haunt us. They can be helpful, harmful, haunt us. They can do whatever. They can help set us up for success. They can set us up for failure. And everybody has stories. Anybody who's thinking has a story in their head. Doesn't even matter the language. I got to have sessions with folks that are in Finland, and it was like, oh yeah, no, it still works. So then I knew that was the part that I wanted to improve. And so started pursuing that. And then that was also the time that I started my podcasting as well. And then I did 100 podcasts. I had this one guy in particular, Ryan Sprague. And then I asked him at the end of the podcast, does he know of any guests that would be a good fit? He introduced me to Kimberly Kesting for Enlifted, Enlifted, out of Richmond, Virginia. She introduced me to Mark England, who is the founder. And then the Enlifted process, the Enlifted certification, is where I learned a lot of the aspects around words, stories, breath, and how they can impact us. We can breathe high and tight. We can breathe low and slow. And then we go in to figure out how to decrease the intensity. And all of these separate events, looking back now, because Steve Jobs has a quote, it's easier. How does it go? It's easier to see. It's easier looking backwards and forwards to see how things are connected. And I don't think that's exactly a quote, but that was the main idea. And so when I'm looking back on it, now I see how all these things just funnel in. So that's how all my past to this present point in time has influenced me being a clarity consultant. And also, to tie back to the change in 2016, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that the person I am today that I am incarnated as I am now, I'd be able to go back in time to 2016 and be like, bro, I have the thing for you. And then I wouldn't have almost a decade of learning to do. So I can condense a decade of learning into a short period of time now. And then for the future, I have a mission statement that I just line up with. So my main goal for anything, for myself, the standard and the expectation that I hold myself to, which I also project outwards. So I reflect on and I project it outwards to others, is the persistent pursuit of self-betterment and to be a positive contribution to the human race and to be a sovereign, savage servant.
I love the additional alliteration there. I mean, all of these things are so interesting in that everything that we do leads us to where we are. And I know that seems like so cheesy to say, even coming out of my mouth, like, wow, what a nice cliche. But it is true. Like we talk about regrets, and even people, again, maybe a little bit more easier to swallow, maybe more relatable, is like, oh, I wish I never stopped playing sports. I wish I never stopped, started eating junk food or started drinking or started, insert thing here that led me to this place where I need to lose weight and all this stuff. Like, well, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe you needed to go through that to get to this place, to be able to learn and accept certain people for help and information into your life. And then whatever's coming next is going to be greater, and maybe you would have never got there. You wouldn't have had problems, but you would have also potentially not had these like big wins or big realizations or big lessons. So it's hard to play with that the whole thing of regrets. But anyways, starting now into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts. Then talk to me a little bit about like where should we start? You tell me. You direct me here. Where do you want to start with explaining your process? Is it something about how we define mindset, something about victim mentality, and that kind of like that coming from that place? Where do you want to start?
Oof. Okay. I'm going to start with victim mentality because it's a definition that I can share, and I believe that when the definition is introduced, folks can reflect on whether or not they see themselves as the victim mentalist, or the victim period. And then I can dive into the frame that I have or the practice that I have, because I can dive into mindset on that one.
Okay.
Sweet.
Sounds
so
good. Because I think if we say like, get rid of the victim mentality, most people's response will be like, oh, I'm not a victim. I don't have that. I don't have that.
Totally.
But until we define it.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Yeah, exactly. So without the definition, no one really truly knows whether they are or are not. They're just like, victim. I'm no victim. Fuck that. And I would actually counter that and say everyone has played a victim, or I would say has played a victim at any point in their time in whatever variety of ways, whether big or small. So the victim mentality, and I'll go through it twice. And if anyone has pen and paper, I highly recommend writing it down. The victim mentality is an acquired personality trait in which a person tends to regard himself or herself as the victim of other people's actions, even in the absence of clear evidence. A victim mentality depends on a habitual thought process and attributions. To be a victim is a habit. To be a victor is a habit. We can have a victim mentality, we can have a victor mentality. So diving into that definition, it's an acquired personality trait, which means someone has developed it over time. It is a practice. When the person tends to regard himself or herself as the victim in the absence of clear evidence, it means that they're creating the evidence in their head. So if someone was objectively observing it outside of them, they may or may not agree, because it's a story. It's not true victim. And when I think of victim, I think victim is a victim in the moment of experience. Whatever the I was about to say transaction, but that wasn't right. Whatever the event was, a person is a victim in that very moment. Anything past that point is maintained by the person. So something that would be a common one, how we're in 2024 and the CVID was in 2020, that's 4-year difference. And folks still utilize COVID as the source of their victimhood, even 4 years later. So clearly there's so little they could have done in that time frame. Yeah. So the victim mentality is something that's maintained. And how it's a tendency and habitual. We have about 60,000, 80,000 repetitive thoughts per day. We have habitual thoughts. And if we're not mindful of what those thoughts are, then they're going to influence how we behave. And so if much of the dialogue and the narrative is against us rather than for us, then we're going to fall into a victim state because, well, technically we're sticking it to the man, quotey fingers. However, we are the man that we're sticking it to. Yeah. It's like, I think of it visually, I see it where it's like if you're driving and one tire pops and then you get out of the car and then you pop the other tires. It's like that.
Right.
So that's how I define the victim mentality.
So is step one of this understanding the definition, and then step two is finding places in your life where you do this and maybe subconsciously so. And I think a very food and nutrition related aspect of this would be like, well, Susie always brings pizza on Friday to the office. I have to have a piece. And it's like, well, you don't have to. And
Correct.
You're being a victim by blaming Susie for bringing the pizza. Susie didn't stuff the pizza down your throat. Like, is that sort of the thing where we have to start to look at the things that we do in our life and figure out where are we blaming someone else for something that we actually have control over?
Yes. Because that's taking a projection and turning it into a reflection. So using that exact same sentence, so a story, Susie brings pizza every Friday for work. I have to have pizza because Susie brings it to work. So those would be like good dialogues. And then you said something there that was really good. It was along the lines of, it's because of Susie that I eat pizza.
Right.
Cross out Susie and write down me. It's because of me that I eat pizza. Has nothing to do with Susie. And those are the stories outside of that. So even if we think, oh yes, not having this pizza because I know I have my meals, I'm fucking set. That's good. You're prepped. To have the pizza is still okay too, if you're making a conscientious decision to do so. When we're having it because of other people's quote unquote obligations or expectations they set, we are behaving off of their stories and their expectations rather than our own story. So we're going to be a duplicate of whoever we're adopting stories from. We're not being our own self. And so there could be 10 people that eat Susie's pizza, and there could be 10 people that are like, pizza again?
Right.
And
or
so
they didn't even want it, right?
Totally. And so then that like expectation, there's that story of I have to do it, quotey fingers, because someone brought it. And if I don't bring it, then I look rude. And if I look rude, then I'm going to be rejected from the crew. If I'm rejected from the crew, then I'm probably going to get fired. And if I get fired, then I'm not going to have a job. So I better have the pizza.
So it sounds to me like the victim mentality is about taking personal responsibility for everything in your life.
Totally.
And of course, there are some things that genuinely are outside of your control, freak weather accident, whatever. There's stuff that's outside of your control, but they're very few. Like for the most part, you can control your actions and you can certainly control your response to a given scenario, right? So, it's snowing like crazy and whatever, and you can't get to the gym. Like, well, yeah, maybe you can't drive to the gym, but can you do push-ups and something at home? Like, could you do that? Could you make that choice and take that personal responsibility instead of being a victim to the weather, which is a genuine reason why you may not be able to get to the gym that day? Doesn't mean you don't exercise or cheat on your diet or whatever the thing is, right? So you take that personal responsibility for everything that you do in your life and you kind of make it work to the best of your ability all the time.
Totally. And also to go like a step into that story as well, a narrative a story that could be there is, I cannot make it to the gym because of the snow, therefore I cannot work out. That is an inaccurate story.
Right.
And you just laid out the exact framework and the groundwork for that. And going into those levels of thinking to the most, like the very first principles, like push-ups and bodyweight squats, totally doable. So then it's the bare minimum, and then people can like change accordingly.
Right.
Or adjust accordingly.
So So maybe within a fitness context or outside of it, what are some other common ones that are maybe like a little bit less obvious than the examples that we've laid out here, where people fall into this victim mentality without really realizing it?
When they believe themselves to be an imposter. Yeah, and that would go across all levels, I believe, across all themes. We'll go themes or genres of stories. So imposter, I like this one. I like this one because it's pretty simple. Where do you have pen and paper over there?
No, I can take notes on my phone.
Okay, cool. Even if you say it, you might be able to feel a difference. So say the word or say the sentence, I am an imposter.
I am an imposter.
Breathe it in. Let out. Now describe the feels that sentence brings up. Describe the emotions.
Makes me feel negative. Makes me feel anxious. And it makes me feel, it's kind of describing it, but it makes me feel like a fraud. It makes me feel like I don't belong.
Fair. Whereabouts do you feel in your body?
In my throat.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. On a scale of 1 to 10, how intense is that feeling? 10 being the most intense.
I would say like a 6, but I think it's only because if we were really doing this, it would be a little bit more extreme, but like a 6.
Yeah, we're going with this is just a language game, man. We're just having fun with this one. So imposter. Let's look at the definition. I'll just ask you this one. An imposter, or I'll tell you this one, then I'll ask you. An imposter, to my understanding, is someone whose thoughts, actions, and words are all out of alignment. Would you say that your thoughts, your words, and your actions are out of alignment? Is that accurate? Broadly,
I would say generally no, but on some things for sure.
So now on those some things, this might be fun, or it could be fun. Now instead of imposter, we're going to cross out imposter and say I am a beginner. So give that one a whirl. Say that one out loud and breathe it in.
I am a beginner.
Let it out. Do you notice a difference?
Yeah. Saying that out loud feels different. And if I start to think about certain things where I might feel like an imposter, reframing it to being a beginner feels correct.
Totally.
And it feels more like it's like you're being unfair to yourself by calling yourself an imposter, and you've given yourself that label because you don't recognize that you're a beginner. Wait,
am I allowed to swear? I almost had a big F on.
Go for it.
Fucking right. Fucking right. So that's it. The example of decreasing the intensity. So that was a harmful sentence. Then we translated it from, or we can actually put it into like a cool alchemy style. We transmuted it from a lead story to a golden story. And so you can feel the physiological changes. So now that's how it could work all across the board, where someone just has one frame that people have adopted. Oh, everybody is an imposter, so we all have imposter syndrome, which is not accurate. I think that most folks are much more on the beginner side of things, or they're just starting out, or they're just fresh, or they're just not competent in whatever that thing is yet.
Yeah. You ever heard that quote? I've been thinking about this a lot recently. There's like one of those like someone's law, but it's something to the effect of never attribute to malice what can be attributed to incompetence. And so when you see people do stuff, it's like, oh my God, how could like XYZ thing happen? And sometimes it's because like there is some evil, wrongdoing, or someone did that. But oftentimes like, well, those people are just not that good at their job or that good at what they do. And so they just like made a big whoopsie, and maybe they're in a position where they shouldn't be doing that, but they did because they're human and because people make mistakes. And so I don't know, that's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, just to explain the way that a lot of things are in the world. And as I'm talking this through, I think it circles back to this victim mentality where you have set an expectation for yourself that you should be perfect. Every time Susie brings that pizza into the office, you should be able to say, you should say no, because you know that that's right. And you're not being malicious to yourself or being stupid or bad or wrong or, harming yourself intentionally, but you're flawed because you're a person. And so your incompetence, quote unquote, in that area leads you to the victim mentality of, well, Susie brought the pizza. I couldn't say no to Susie. I had the pizza. Right?
Totally. Yeah. You hit the nail on the head, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the reason.
Interesting stuff. That's very cool.
Nice.
There's a lot of like neurons fired in my brain right now.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Well, that's what it's all about too. Is just thinking about the thinking, and then like feeling a sense of expansiveness in your mind. Like it's like, to me, what it feels like. Ooh, this is a cool one. I haven't thought of this before. What it feels like. There's two parts. What it feels like is going from, okay, yeah. So, and I've heard a couple people have referenced it like this, where when you're overwhelmed by stories that are being held on, that you feel like you're drowning. And so it has that same feeling, that same heaviness. And then when those stories become alleviated, become depowered, then we can come up for air. And it has that, it's like breathing for the first time. And it's like
that cliche saying of like, you gotta get a weight off your chest so you can take a deep breath, right? It's that same thing.
Exactly. And that's a thing for a reason. And it is taking a weight off your chest. It's just conceptual and metaphysical rather than a physical weight.
But it all feels the same anyways.
Totally. Yeah, our brain can't tell the difference. Our brain can't tell the difference between thoughts and reality. Actually, something that's really cool that's not even recognized in psychology. Time is not recognized in psychology because it's not an objective measure.
Explain that a little bit more. Let me chew on it.
So we understand that time physically is linear. So we're born and then we die. So there's that component. However, there's only ever the present moment. And so there's no future, there's no past. And so we can take stories from the past and bring it into the present and feel shitty about things that happened 20 years ago. And we can feel good about things that happened 20 years from now by creating it in the present. And so time doesn't have that physical body. Yes, there's definitely a timeline. Emotional body is timeless, and it can hold on to the stories. It can hold on to the emotions, the feels. Yeah. It could just linger.
Is this sort of the same thing where it's like if you have something on your mind, it can weigh you down, and it doesn't even have to be a big thing. It can be something as small as like, after work today, I know I have to go get groceries. And so, that you have, no milk, no eggs, no whatever left in the fridge. And you're like, I need to go get groceries. And so all day in your head, you're like, I need to leave work like 5 minutes early because I need to get to the grocery stores because I need to go get groceries. And you're thinking about this all day in your head. It's like a thought that's like, it's something that's going to happen in the future. And it's not even that big a deal. Like, you can get groceries. That's not like a difficult thing to accomplish doing. But it's occupying a lot of mind space and occupying, therefore, then a lot of like emotional energy in your day, getting in the way of like, okay, yes, meeting this, Zoom thing, this, get this email out, whatever, but also groceries. And also, my boss said this and my kid said this and my friend said this and groceries. And it's just taking up space for no real reason. Is that sort of along the same lines?
Totally. And I could definitely, I'll add to that one as well, where two parts. So when we have the accumulation of those thoughts, so how you listed a bunch of things. So I like to think of those as desktops tabs on a desktop. Mm-hmm. So the more tabs that we have open, the slower the computer is going to run, the slower our brain's going to run. And then, so that's one point where I focused on trying to think about as few things as possible. Think of the most important things. And I like to have it as a frame where I focus and think about the things that I am participating in the process of. So that's where I keep my focus, my frame. And so to decrease the desktop tabs is to do those things. So between the point of one, making the decision, I'm going to go get groceries, and getting the groceries done, that timeline is controllable. And the time between deciding to do it and actually getting it done, that's where we get to accumulate anxiety cost. So the cost of not doing the thing promotes anxiety as a symptom, as a side effect of not doing the thing. So for me, I like to decrease the anxiety that I experience, unless it's anxiety of excitement rather than anxiety of frustration. Mm-hmm. And I'll pay attention if it's anxiety of incongruence, but that's different. So then by making the decision to just go get those groceries, even with those other tabs open, at least you're closing out one tab that you don't need to think about, which reduces the overall anxiety cost. So I would say that with that, when it comes to the point of the desktop tab or the thought being opened and the decision being made and getting it done as quickly as possible.
One way that I think that I didn't even really realize it until just hearing you speak about it now, that I think that I try to combat this is actually just using to-do lists and physical paper lists, where it's like something like groceries is a decent example of this, I think, because maybe I can't go right this second. It's not urgent where it needs to be done right now. And like, I just realized it or thought of it and like, it needs to be done. So I can't drop everything that I'm doing. It's not of utmost importance to like go do it right now. But by getting it out of my head and onto a piece of paper, I know that, and now I don't have to spend any mental energy on trying to like remember that it has to happen, because like it's right there on my to-do list. Like, that's on maybe it's on my phone or it's on my desk or on my computer or whatever. And now it's going to get done, rather than spending the energy thinking about that. I have to remember that it's going to, like, trying to remember to do the thing. Right.
Totally.
It's just like, hey, it's there and it's going to get done. And you task out a bunch of small, but not urgent, not necessarily gigantic, significant things. And I think we waste a lot of energy trying to hold a lot of things in our head when we can just offload it to a sheet of paper.
Yes.
And then like, hey, it's going to get done. And then I can actually spend the bandwidth. It's almost like closing those tabs. They still have to happen, but you close those tabs so you can focus your actual energy on the thing that you're doing right now.
Absolutely. And yes. So now take that same frame of writing down the grocery list and apply it to any other story ever.
Right.
So then you're closing down those desktops, because how many of us, I have two desktops that I can see right now that two desktops that I have not ventured into for probably the last month. And now take that desktop and apply it to a life. And then you have a desktop story that's been on replay that you open up your computer and you see it every day. And then it's just eyeballing you.
Yeah. Even like for me, a perfect example is, I don't know how you set yourself up when you were doing your podcast, but when I'm in the podcast, I close every other thing on my computer, and I will lose my place on some other stuff that maybe I was doing before. But I have to do that because I know that having other tabs and other programs and whatever open is too distracting for me to be able to focus on the conversation that we're having. So I have two screens on my computer that are open on the screen. Obviously no one can see it, but it's just like, it's our video stream here, and then just the notes of the episode here on the other side. But there's nothing else open because it's too distracting. I can't hold those other thoughts in my head while trying to have this conversation and do all the things. But it's the same as like, and maybe this comes into like this whole concept of multitasking, and maybe we're taking a little bit of a left turn here, but how many things can we really do at once? And I don't think it's that many.
I agree. I agree. Both from an experiential standpoint and also an observance standpoint.
Yeah. So just lock in and get the thing done, and then check it off and move on to the next one. Right.
Exactly. That is multitasking.
Yeah,
that is multitasking. Just one after another. Because I think that there's more. This is a thought that's popped up now. I think that there's more excitement by folks getting a lot of things going rather than having one thing done. Yeah. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is. Talk to me about some magic words then. What is abracadabra, magic, spells? These are things that you sent to me, and I'm very curious. I've been curious since whatever it was last week or the week before when we chatted.
You're like, what the fuck? So yeah, words are actually, I'll go into a practice the practice tangent, and I'll be able to hit a couple other things on the way, because then we get to go into defining mindset too. So tying that. So the practice that I'm developing, or I have developed, it's called NLSE, short for Neurolinguistic Somatic Experience. And breaking that down, neuro, meaning of the mind, specifically mindset. So this ties into what we were talking about earlier. And folks understand that mindset is a good thing to work on. However, once again, similar to imposter or victim mentality, there's not a definition that is practical, specifically a practical definition, so that we can observe how things are going. So mindset, I define mindset as the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, or our opinion of ourselves. And so we can have a lesser or higher opinion of ourselves. And if we understand I'm thinking lesser of myself, then we can make decisions and adjust to think higher of ourselves. Which, if we're thinking lesser of ourselves, it's not going to take very much to think higher of ourselves. And then so by being able to have a definition from mindset, then we're able to really dive into where we can improve it. Then the L, linguistic, language, and that is what we say, what we think, what we write, and how we breathe. So the breath part's I'll go with the words part. So this ties into the magic of it. So words are made of characters, A, B, C, D, blah, 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 blah. And those characters are spelled into a word. We spell words. These are spells. Mm-hmm. And abracadabra, because you mentioned abracadabra, I'll actually ask you, what do you think of when you hear abracadabra?
Like a kid's magic show.
Yeah. So abracadabra, this could actually tie up, because you have, I was thinking of someone else. So abracadabra, translated from Aramaic, which is an old language, Jesus' language back in the day. Abracadabra translated is, with my word I create, and with my word I influence. So the words we speak, think, write, those are the words that are going to be of great influence and of great importance on how we experience the world around us. And so that's how we get to utilize words and stories to pivot things. They're magic, which sounds crazy. However, when we get into diving into diving into the work, people notice it, and there's a pivot. So how we went from imposter to beginner, you felt a difference.
Yeah.
And that's magical. We were able to pivot a sensation in a moment. And so then how language is how we breathe. If we're breathing high and tight, we're good to fight. If we're breathing low and slow, we're good to flow. So high and tight in the chest, or low and slow in the belly. So it'd be, oh my God, I'm on a podcast. I don't know. Or it'll just be, oh my gosh, I'm on a podcast. I don't know what I'm doing. Oh my gosh, blah, 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 blah. So we hold our breath up in our chest, and it doesn't allow us to regulate and be present. And when we can recognize, so maybe consciously we're not aware of something that's going on. However, we notice that our breathing is a little bit higher up in our chest. It's like, oh, okay, body. What are you trying to tell me? Is there a threat around? Nope, there's no threat around. Okay. Down regulate. Bring it into the body. Bring it into the belly. So now we're breathing low and slow, and we're good to flow. So that's how the breath works as a communicator between our body and our mind. Similar to how our intuition, like we have an intuitive, like a gut sense. We may not understand it from a physiological or a conscientious standpoint. However, in our intuition, we have the sense of this place is not a place that we really want to vibe with. So when we learn to listen to these three different components, the head, the heart, and the intuition, or the conscious self, the animal self, and the uniself, the universal being, or the intuitive self, the intuitive being, I see it all the same. Then we're able to converse. We speak the language. Then from NLS, somatic being soma, of the body, And it's not just the physiological body, it's also the emotional body. The physical body has an intelligence that it can heal itself. We don't have to intervene if we cut like our finger. However, the emotional body, like I mentioned earlier, is timeless. The emotional body can hold on to stories. So that's where we go back and feel something from the past. And that's how we go in and we actively participate in the processing of those emotions in order to allow our emotional body a moment to breathe and heal with our involvement. Because I also believe that folks point outwards, they project outwards their solutions when the solution's already within them. And it's about pulling that out rather than accumulating more. So it's decrease and then have the authentic, like the main version of the self at the core. So yeah, and we tie into breath work as well, because it's all tied in there. And so the breath work is just a way to be able to alleviate the intensity, to be able to bring everything down to a grounded, stable level. And by being able to do that, then we create more openness. So my aim is to create openness, both conceptually and physiologically. And then E, being experience, being that it happens really quick. And I'll actually say it on this podcast too, because I'm really curious to see if anyone takes up this challenge. It's not really a challenge. It's more of a collaboration. I would put this practice next to any other practice, any time of day, at any point. I would go with it. Even folks that I've had, some of my favorite folks to work with are the folks that I've had 10 years of therapy. They've been going to the same exact therapist for 10 years. So they've been talking about and reminiscing the same thing for that time. And I come in broadly, and this is a solution to specifically bad therapy. And I define bad therapy, definitions. I define bad therapy as the symptoms persist or get worse, or new symptoms arise. So piggybacking off of the imposter syndrome part, so how we just switched it up where it went from imposter to beginner, it's like, oh yeah, I feel better now. So let's say you did the same thing. You went to a therapist. I have imposter syndrome. Okay, let's talk about all your childhood memories. They all come up, which is good. I like that. The memories come up. The stories come up. They're brought to the forefront because therapy provides an opportunity for folks to speak to someone who is objective and not involved in their world, in their fellowship. And so I think it's very important for therapists to be able to have that space to be able to pull those stories out. I like that part. I don't like it when symptoms persist. So you go in, following week, you're talking about the same things that you talked about the week before. Then you go in for the third week, and then the therapist is like, oh, how you doing today? And you say, oh, you know what? I'm feeling a little down, a little bit more apathetic. I'm not really hungry that much. I'm not sleeping that well. I'm not really motivated. And then the therapist could say something like, oh, well, Daniel, those are all symptoms of depression. You're clearly a depressed person then. Let's get you on some of those meds. So that's how I would look at it as bad therapy. And so where NLSE comes in is on the tail end where people can bring those stories to get processed. Because there's a processing that therapy doesn't have. And a lot of like prominent therapists from Yale, Harvard, they've written about this as well, how psychology in itself doesn't yet have a processing portion. It has a way of analyzing, organizing, systematizing, and then also bringing to the forefront ideas and just conversation. And that's great. And I don't think folks need to go to therapy for so long. I think resolution happens, actually evolution, not even revolution, because I find therapy to be a revolving door rather than an evolving door. So I'd rather have folks evolve from there.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, it's to liken it to more physical things that I'm personally more familiar with is like physiotherapy or like a physical injury. You hurt your ankle. Like you don't have to go see the physio, chiro, athletic therapist, whoever, forever. Like you go in for however many weeks or however many sessions you need to like fix the ankle and move on. And maybe there are some like prehab and post rehab things that like need to be continued and upkeep and what have you, but you're not in there. It's like, it's not, you don't go there and your ankle gets worse. That's horrible.
Totally.
if that's what's happening.
Yes,
and so
agreed.
I'm not like, psychological therapy is almost certainly more complex than, ankle, knee, hip, shoulder, whatever, but it shouldn't be so different in that, like, you expect outcomes. You expect an outcome from a thing.
Yes.
It's great to like, I feel good and I got that off my chest. Like, okay, that's step number one. It's like, get the inflammation down. It's okay, let's get the pain away. Now we got to strengthen it up again. Now we got to make it resilient. It's the same sort of thing, just with the mind. And obviously the practices and the processes are a little bit different. But like the pathway should be relatively the same, right?
Totally. And something that I added for context on my website is that NLSE itself is a outcomes focused practice rather than a problems focused practice. So we can find problems and the focus is to find the outcome.
Yeah. It's really easy to say like, hey, you are depressed, anxious, you have weak shoulders, weak calves, weak quads, weak mindset, you're a victim. That's great. It's great that you can like label all the shit that's like wrong with me. Like, cool. I get that that's part of it, but like, what do we actually do about this? Like, we need to fix this. That's why I came here. I knew that was broken or that there was something that I needed to fix. I need you to help me fix it.
Totally.
Yeah. Very cool stuff, man. Very cool stuff. What else do you want to talk about in regards to this? Like, what is another thing, if anything, that people should, I mean, I'm sure we could go like for forever, but as we start to kind of wrap it up, like, is there any big aspects of what you do now that we've missed or that you want to highlight?
Any big aspects of what I do now that we have missed or anything that I want to highlight? Anything that I've missed? Another question that popped up was there anything that has to be said that hasn't been said yet? I'm going to go with, damn, you just put me on a whole, like, my brain just went all so many places because it was very open-ended. So I was like, let's go with, I don't know, there's a part where there's my own thoughts that would just be flowing. Let me ask you this then. Here's a more pointed question.
Cool. How do you enter people into this? So we have the NLSE and we've got, the body and the mind and the breath and the things. Does everyone enter from the same point? Does it depend on the person? Where do we start with the body? We start with the breath. We start with the conversations, the stories. Like, what's the entry point? And how do you determine what that is for each person?
Sweet. Yeah, that's an easier one. The entry point. So if I'm working with someone or if someone just wanted to go with it on the fly.
If you're working with someone, let's assume
cool.
that. On the fly is a whole different ballgame.
Fair. Yeah. So working with someone, the frames are the exact same. It's only the subjective individual that changes. Yeah. So the frames stay the same. So everything is lined up with the NLSE component. So we're diving into words, stories, and breath as the main three. And so I want to go with the whole process. So everything's done on desktop and I do sessions via Zoom. So it's similar to how we're doing a podcast now. And then we both have a Google document up. The Google document specifically so that me and whoever I'm working with are literally on the same page. Everything's black and white. Nothing's open to interpretation. And what people say is their words, not mine. I ask more questions than I do talking. That's for sure. And so that's the first part. Before our first session, send them that, fill out the form. And everybody gets 2 complimentary sessions free because I'm on a goal. I have a mission, I have a target to have 100 participants participate in 2 complimentary sessions. And so everyone has the same fly on that one. So then it goes Zoom call, Google document. In the Google document, there's intake questions. I read through it prior to our session to see if there's anything in particular to explore. Then on the session itself, I ask if the participant, or I like saying participant rather than client. Then when the participant comes on, I ask if they want to work on anything in particular that's either on or off the document. Because it's their session, so I want to see where they're at and I want to meet them where they're at. I don't want to bring them to a certain place. This is their journey. I'm more of a force ghost. I'm there, but I'm not quite there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we just explore stories. And then it goes heavy, and then we decrease that. And then me and the participant will both know when it's time to celebrate the wins. And then oftentimes I've been finding it happens sooner than most, because folks go through like the heavy stuff within the first 3 to 4 sessions. And then past that point, it's just people are celebrating their wins, coming up with goals, talking about things that they actually did for highlights, wins that they had the week before. So each week we're accumulating data and wins. And on the document, the thing that's cool about it, because I do it weird where we start at the top and then I push things down. So the older stuff is at the bottom, the newer stuff is at the top. And it's really beautiful from my perspective. So when I get to see it, this is what I think is beautiful, is being able to go however many pages. It could be 10, it could be 50, it could be 100. And you get to see pages of a person's growth. Mm-hmm. And the thing that's beautiful about this is that having those pages, that data, is undeniable evidence of progress. And so the document in itself is an indicator of progress. And so folks, honestly, like when you see, it's really hard to say that you suck when you see the progress in front of your face.
Right.
Like it's interesting. It's interesting. And so, then it goes down from there. And then if the person wants to continue on, then that's cool. If they don't want to continue on, then usually it's a point where we both agree that there's nothing more that I can do. Because my focus is I don't want to work with people for a long time. I want to work with people for a quality time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I love that. I think even the tracking it, because you're tracking what they're saying, like it gets back to the beginning, which is like the words that you use to describe yourself and the world around you and the stories and all the things. Like you will see over time, and I'm sure you do see this, the words that they use change.
Yes.
And they become, I don't know what direction they necessarily go, and it'll be different for each person, but they change and improve in some way.
Yes.
Whether it's what they describe about themselves or what they describe about something from the past or something that they foresee in the future or what have you. And that must be a really interesting thing.
Definitely. And I'll tie it over to a fitness reference now, because one just popped up and I'm like, oh yeah, here we go. So let's say, for example, you have a client that comes up to you and says, I suck, I'm not doing anything well. And let's say hypothetically they were working with you for 12 months. And let's say, I'm not sure how you organize it, but let's say you have progress photos involved, and let's say it's a week, like every week. So let's say that final month, they're like, I don't feel like I've made any progress. And it's like, yo, I'm just going to whip up like 52 weeks of your progress photos, and I'm going to provide you the evidence to show that you're wrong about your opinion. And it's cool. You can have your opinion. I don't know. Yeah. I'm just going to work with the facts.
Yeah, that's exactly it. This is why, like, in fitness and in anything that we make progress in, like, we really have to zoom out and give ourselves a little bit more grace for how far that we've come and understand what the correct rate of progression is. Again, weight loss, fat loss thing that comes up is like, I feel like I'm losing weight so slowly. It's like, okay, well, over the last, 10 weeks, you've lost 10, 11, 12 pounds. Like, it's a pretty solid rate of fat loss. Like 1 pound a week is like pretty good. You haven't been going crazy, straining yourself and whatever. Could it be better? Maybe. Could it be worse? For sure. But we have to really zoom out and think like, okay, well, how far have we actually come? And then compare that to how much work have we actually put in. Right? So, if you haven't done the work, you can't expect the result. So
totally. And I'm going to piggyback off that one, because you went zoomed out to macro. I'm going to zoom it into micro and say, oh, I just had a good point and it just fluttered away for a second. So you have macro. So then the question would be for the subjective individual, what's fast and what's slow?
Right.
What's fast and what's slow? Yeah. And why is it that you want it faster rather than wanting it guaranteed?
Yeah. So, and my thing then always comes back to, well, here's what you did, and here's the result that we got, right? And so these two things, when these two things line up and make sense, then like we're good with that. And then we know that, okay, well, we can change the input or output, and then therefore we should expect a different result. When the input doesn't match the result, that's when things get weird. When someone thinks I've been working so hard. I've been crushing it in the gym. I've been, really trying to be nice to myself. I've been really working on my breath work. I've been really trying to do X super, super hard and super, super well. But then the results suggest otherwise. Well, there's a disconnect there.
Totally.
And it's maybe that you're not doing things as well as you think you are, and not on purpose. It's just that's the reality.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe your expectation of the results were way out of line. Like there's a disconnect somewhere.
Totally.
And so then we have to marry those two things and come to a conclusion like, okay, if we do X, we can expect Y. If we don't get Y, then something's wrong with our expectation or something's wrong with our input.
Totally.
And that's okay it's an okay exercise to go through that and really get really clear on what we're doing and what we can expect from it.
Totally. And then going back to the words aspect and the magic of words and tying it into a fitness-esque frame, words. So how we have macronutrients, carbs, fats, protein, they're the building blocks of our body. The carbs and the fats and the protein that we put into our body are going to have some sort of influence on how our physiological being responds. And I view words as the ethereal macronutrients of the mind. If we feed our mind quality words, we're going to have quality thoughts. If we feed our mind shit words, we're going to have shit thoughts. So that was another little
I like that one.
Fitness reference.
I love it. I love it, man. I think that's some good things, not to make a pun, but something good for people to chew on there. You knew that one was coming.
That was good, actually. That was really good. Nerd. I love it.
And yeah, man. Nah, there's a lot here, and I think we should end this here so that people can take this in, because it is a lot to chew off, especially if any of these concepts are like new to you or foreign, weren't sure what you were getting into when you clicked play on this podcast. Like there's a lot here. Anything like last little things? Is there anything that we missed that you specifically wanted to say or talk about or whatever?
I don't know. Can I pitch myself?
Absolutely. And give the contact info. I'll throw it in the show notes or whatever.
Oh,
but yeah, give me the pitch.
So the main pitch is super simple. I already mentioned it earlier, where I'm having 100 folks participate in 2 complimentary sessions each. It's open to anyone, and there's no charge. It's pro bono, complimentary. It's a gift. I'm gifting your listeners 2 complimentary sessions. Not to interrupt you,
but is there a specific type of person who would, not necessarily that you're looking for, but that would maybe benefit from this more, or that would like adopt this a little bit better? Is there any kind of like past experience, anything like that you can speak to?
There's 3 main components that folks that get the most out of this. So it's not a specific person. It's a specific frame. Mm-hmm. So one would be an open-mindedness, an openness to explore, and to allow that exploration without judgment. So there's no right or wrong answers. It's just an openness to explore. So that's one part. Another part, which is a big one, is a true, sincere desirability or desire to change where they are presently. And they may not be aware of it yet. However, maybe they are. And so desirability, openness, desirability, and an okay, or a willingness. A willingness to test the pain thresholds. Because it can get some ouchy stuff, which happens less often than most folks think. But those are the 3 common denominators that get the most out of it, that have had a stupid amount of success in it. An open-mindedness, a desire to actually make changes, a sincere desire to change, and an okayness. I'll say it's an okayness. It's like no one wants to go into pain. No one wants to test their pain threshold. However, I believe that pain is the blacksmith that forges us into the ultimate weapon. Without that difficulty, challenge, and pain, which I don't believe we visit pain enough nowadays, because we're in a very abundant realm, like where we are. So I find that the folks that have that openness to test their pain threshold are ones that are going to, no matter what they do, are going to crush anyone around them in their endeavor, without a doubt in my mind. So those would be the 3 characteristics that get the most out of it. What folks have experienced when they came in would be self-doubt, destructive self-behavior, negative narratives, blaming everyone else. If folks are blaming everyone else, then that's going to be a really good one, because then it's going to turn projections into reflections, and we're going to see how we are the common denominator in our problems rather than pointing out all the common denominators in the external world that are uncontrollable. And then ambitious folks. There's folks that want ambition. They want autonomy. They don't want to be slaves to their own mind or to other people's minds. They wish to pursue their own desired life experiences with support from people, rather than paying attention to the naysayers and to the negative Nancys.
I love it, man. And where can people contact you? Where can they find you?
The Instagram's the easiest, and it's Dapper Dude Kyle, Dapper, Dude, Dude, Kyle, Kyle.
Love it.
And that's what my handle is for everywhere on pretty much everything.
Nice. Very good. Very good, man. Dapper Dude Kyle on Instagram and everywhere else. That will be the best place to contact Kyle. Kyle, you're the man. I appreciate you. Thank you for reaching out to share with us about this, because it's a big, important thing, and it's new and exciting and different, but as much, if not more important than many of the other things that we talk about far too frequently. I am for sure part of the camp where I get sick of, like, how many times can we talk about a calorie deficit and increasing your protein? And it's like, okay, like, all this stuff, like, matters. It's important, like, obviously, but, like, there are bigger things that we need to talk about. And sometimes I like to get past that and go into, like, the level 2 stuff, as I would say. Of course. And this is probably beyond that. So I appreciate you, bringing this to us and sharing with us. So thank you, man.
Dude, it's my pleasure. And it's my pleasure. And I very much appreciate it. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to chat. And you got some good vibes, brother. That's why I reached out to you. And I'm like, I just want to have a conversation with this motherfucker.
Exactly, man. No, I love it. Thank you, man. Everybody check out Kyle, especially if you, especially if you're in Edmonton, but that also has no impact on it. Especially if you're in Edmonton, for sure, because local boys stick together, and girls. But no matter where you are in the world, so give Kyle a message. I'll throw his contact in the show notes. Give the episode a like, share, subscribe, all those good things. Help spread the message. Help spread good vibes and good knowledge to everyone. So appreciate each and every one of you. Kyle, thank you so much again. Everybody else, go outside, be a good person. We'll see you next time.